Hey, hey, hey. I hope everybody is doing well. Hope you had a good Labor Day weekend. I know I did. Actually, I spent most of my Labor Day weekend cleaning. So I don't, and organizing and getting rid of clothes to prepare to donate to the Repeat Boutique, which is basically a place where you can donate clothes and people can buy clothes. But yeah, I spent my weekend cleaning, which is actually really nice because it was productive. But I hope everybody had a great Labor Day weekend. I'm really excited about tonight's topic just because I don't see a lot of folks touching it. I think some folks don't know how to always navigate, how to talk about politics as it relates to the workplace. And it's a difficult subject. So, yeah, we're going to talk about it tonight. A few other updates. I have a lot going on. I'll be joining the Goldman Sachs 1 Million Black Women program this fall. I'm super excited about it. I actually know at least, I would say at least 3 or 4 people who are going to be a part of this cohort, which is exciting. It's always nice when you know at least a few folks because, you don't have to try to like meet all new people, because sometimes that can be incredibly overwhelming. But I'm excited to meet as many of my cohort members as possible. You all won't believe this, but it's going to be 300 of us this time. So in previous cohorts, there were only 150 members, but this time around, we're going to have 300, which is quite exciting. And I think it's great because it just shows how committed Goldman Sachs is to really helping Black women advance as entrepreneurs and really thrive and scale and take our businesses to the next level. So I'm really excited about that. And then one other exciting update that I'm excited about is that I'll be a part of the Change Collective. And so I start that program this fall as well. And so I do know several cohort members who will be a part of that initiative. And so, yeah, it's a lot of exciting things going on. But even still, I will always try to find time to talk about current issues as it pertains to DEI, as it pertains to the workforce and the workplace as a whole, right? I'm always going to try to find time because as we continue to grow and evolve as a society, we're going to continue encountering different issues that maybe we have not encountered before. That's going to require us to think in the gray area. And that's where I tend to do really well, in the gray area. So we are going to have to think about how do we navigate some of these different situations that have a real impact on so many people in the workplace. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Whew. Let's talk about it. Political polarization in the workplace. So it's interesting because, every 4 years, we find ourselves in a situation where you have people who are on all sides of the spectrum, right, who have different viewpoints on various things. But I would say the last 10 years in particular have been particularly unique. So this decade has been unlike any other season that I've seen. And, when I talk to people who are, baby boomers and Gen Xers, they have said the same thing. So I recognize that I have not seen as many political or presidential elections as, like, say, my aunts and uncles, but they have all said the same thing, right? The last decade or so has been particularly unique and has been particularly polarizing for a lot of people. And when we think about the rise of these political tensions and how they influence workplace dynamics, it's important for us to recognize that, hey, we got to talk about this. We have to figure out how to navigate it. And I think one of the things that a lot of employers try to do is to try to remain as apolitical as possible. Like, we're not going to have conversations about it. Let's just not talk about politics. But for a lot of people, we have to recognize that it's hard to shut off what's happening outside of work. So if you're dealing with a family situation, if you're dealing with something financial, like a financial crisis, if you're dealing with something personal, if you're dealing with anything outside of the workplace, it is virtually impossible to completely turn off what is happening in the world outside of the workplace, right? And so we know it's real for a lot of people. They bring that with them. And another thing that makes it particularly difficult to turn off some of the political conversations is that a lot of what's happening politically will have a direct impact on the workplace. So when you talk about certain legislation and you talk about different laws and different things like that, a lot of it will directly impact the workforce. So it's hard not to think about it. And it's hard not to bring, what you're thinking about to your workplace every day. And so I have always been a fan of, instead of requiring work, instead of requiring employees to just not talk about politics at all or talk about anything that could, cause a little tension, it's important instead to recognize, okay, how do we have constructive conversations in a manner that is civil, respectful, even if everybody doesn't disagree? Or I'm sorry, even if everybody doesn't agree. And that can look a lot of different ways. And I think that's part of the reason too, when we talk about what's happening with diversity, equity, and inclusion, for some employees, they see it as, oh, this is causing some tension, we should probably just get rid of it. While others recognize, even though this is causing some folks to have different perspectives and they're disagreeing, we still know we're going to become better because of it. And you can think about political conversations in a similar way. Now, the thing about talking about politics or addressing anything political in nature is you have to go into it recognizing that you can't try to change people's core values. You can't change who people are and what they believe at their core, right? That is not the goal anytime you're trying to navigate those conversations. However, it is important to think about, okay, we know that this is real for a lot of people. We know that some people are anxious about it. We know, especially when it comes to mental health and psychological safety, there's been a lot of conversations about that in the workplace, which I think is an excellent thing. And so that is real. A lot of times around this time of the year, during the political season that we're in, where a new president is going to be elected, a lot of people have heightened anxiety, heightened blood pressure, they have trouble sleeping, along with so many other different emotions that manifest. So if we really think that our employees are going to be dealing with all of that outside of the workplace and they're going to be able to completely turn it off when they get to work, we are kidding ourselves, because we know that people deal with real emotions and you bring all of that with you. And one of the things we always talk about is we want people to bring their authentic selves to work. So if we know people are having a hard time focusing and they're distracted, that has a real impact on the workplace. And so we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that people have real concerns, people have different fears, they have different anxieties, they have a lot of different emotions they're experiencing. So I think one of the biggest things is recognizing that in order to really have productive conversations in the workplace, as it relates to anything that can cause some disagreements or cause some folks to feel like, oh, no, I don't agree with you on that, is that you have to really understand how to have constructive conversations on sensitive topics. And you also have to make sure that people understand the importance of active listening and empathy. Now, the reason I bring those two up is because I think part of the reason why we see so many people blow up in certain situations where they just get upset and they're like, they're storming out of the room. I've literally been in a situation where politics were being discussed and people got to the point where it turned into a shouting match. And it was so uncomfortable for the rest of the staff. Like, we didn't know how to handle it. We're like, what do we do in this situation, right? And so you never want it to get to that point. But if we can provide professional development opportunities and just opportunities in general on this is how you engage in constructive conversations. And we welcome the civil discourse while also welcoming active listening and empathy in particular. I think we would have incredibly productive conversations. Now, will people all of a sudden agree with each other and jump from one side to the other? No, but it will decrease the likelihood of, decreasing morale in the workplace because of the different, the different conflicts that are happening, right? Ultimately, the key is to get to a place where you can have healthy dialogue. I'll share a quick personal story. So one of the best supervisors, bosses I've ever had was someone that I worked with when I was at Auburn. And we couldn't be any more different when it came to our political views, when it came to our views on everything from social responsibility to social justice. I mean, we were just like night and day. But she was one of my favorite people on the planet. She just had a genuine spirit about her. She just had a good heart. She always looked out for the people on her team, right? And I think part of the reason we were able to have really great conversations about politics, even though we didn't agree on nothing. I mean, nothing. I mean, every once in a while we would agree on certain things, but for the most part, we were like, we were kind of set in our ways, right? Whereas, I think both of us have shifted a little bit over time. We're a little bit more receptive to hearing like other viewpoints. But I think one of the best things that happened during our conversations is that it allowed us to really show empathy towards the other person, right? And here's what happened that was really amazing, because as we started having these conversations about why we believe what we believe, we started really getting to know each other in a way that we never probably would have if we were too afraid to have those conversations, right? We would have never gotten to know each other the way we did. So I learned everything about, some of the different things she experienced in her life. And I got to share, well, this is why I have this view about certain social justice related matters. And this is why I have this view on this. And so us having that bravery to go forward and say, even though I know I'm not going to agree with pretty much anything you say as it pertains to your political views, because I have very different views, I still welcome what you have to say. I am going to engage in active listening, and I'm going to listen with empathy. So it works. We see that it works. And that's just one example. I've seen it play out in different scenarios where people start talking about different politics. I've seen people on the debate team, and they're very strategic in how they come up with their debates. But it can work where people can argue, or not so much argue, but people can voice opinions that address a matter and have two very different viewpoints on it, two very different perspectives, and they still have productive dialogue. And I think that's going to be the key. Instead of us just saying, okay, we're not going to talk about this at all, we have to recognize that people bring these experiences with them. They can't just shut it off in their mind. I think that is really unrealistic to expect people in the workforce to just completely shut out everything that's happening. And so one of the beauties too, as you think about it, as you have these different conversations and you learn how to really listen actively, how to really listen with empathy, one of the things you'll see is that it actually boosts morale. And I think some people are surprised by that whenever I tell them, like, there is a way to navigate difference in the workplace where it can actually help make the team better. Some people are like, oh, really? Even though everybody's disagreeing and everybody has different perspectives? Yes, it happens all the time. We know there's a lot of research and data that supports it, that shows like diverse teams do better, even though you have people with different perspectives, different backgrounds, but it leads to better outcomes. And the same can actually be true for political diversity, right? Thinking about it from the perspective of, okay, this person has a certain set of values, a certain set of beliefs. This person has a certain set of values, a certain set of beliefs. How can we come together and still work cohesively as a team while recognizing that people have the right to believe, what they believe. Like we cannot try to force it. Like we can't try to force folks to believe something different. And also, we have to recognize that people need to show up authentically. So, I think it's really important for us to think about that and to think about how we can continue fostering a team environment, even though you have people with all types of perspectives, all types of viewpoints. And I think the biggest thing, I know Sherm has really been stressing this, this concept of civility. And really, when you think about civility, what it really boils down to is respect. At the end of the day, civility encompasses a lot of things. You think about inclusivity, you think about collaboration and so many other things, but respect is what it ultimately boils down to. And so for my leaders and managers who might be a little conflict avoidant, because I know this can be particularly tough. This can be a tough season for anybody who's in the leadership role who does not want to deal with conflict. But I want you to think about it differently. Shift your mindset. So instead of saying like, oh no, I got to come up in here and I got to hear them arguing about their different viewpoints, use that as an opportunity to say, okay, we have different viewpoints. How can we listen to each other in a way that's constructive and also recognize that, everyone has the right to believe what they believe and that we can still work together cohesively even though we have different beliefs. So it's just like any other aspect of difference, right? So we're constantly trying to think through, okay, even with our differences, how do we work together? The same is true with politics. No matter what side of the fence a person falls on, what they believe, who they plan to vote for, you can still figure out a way to have constructive dialogue and conversations and to think about, okay, how can we move forward, even with all of the different beliefs that we have as a collective? So that's a really quick and to the point live that I'm doing this week. But it was on my mind because I often read a lot of posts, I read a lot of articles, I listen to podcasts, and I hear about, oh, this is one of the most tense times ever in our society. We're more divided than ever. And I hear about, all of the different things as it pertains to us being really divided as a nation. And to a certain extent, I do agree with that. Like I said, I feel like the last decade in particular has been particularly tense. However, I have always been of the thought process, no matter how divided we become, there's always solutions. There's always a way for us to become more cohesive, even with our differences. And so that's part of the reason I do what I do, because I have a lot of hope in mankind. I know some people think I'm like an eternal optimist, and I'm just like always optimistic about humankind and us coming together. But I really do believe that. I do think, yes, even with all of the different things that make us who we are, in recognizing that every person is unique, that we can still find a way forward, that we can still progress, we can still do things as a collective. So that is it. That is my spiel. At the end of the day, I think it's important for us to think about how we have constructive conversations as opposed to always trying to avoid different discussions. Let's think about, okay, how can we have healthy dialogue, move forward, and keep it progressive. Like let's keep it moving in our workplace so that we're achieving what we need to achieve. So I hope you all enjoy this. Feel free to comment. I see a few people in the comment. Hi, Spring. Hi, Kayla. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And I'll be back probably in a few weeks with another live because I do have another topic in mind. I'm just like, yep, there's a lot happening in our society. So I got content for days at this point. But I appreciate you all as always and have a good evening.